Introduction. Picture this. You're 19 years old. Your biggest financial concern is whether you can afford to split the bill at dinner. For most people, that's just life. Grinding, saving, slowly building something over decades. But then there's a completely different world running parallel to yours. One where teenagers are signing 9-figure deals, buying mansions before they can legally rent a car, and making more in a single Instagram post than most people see in a year. And the wildest part? A lot of them didn't stumble into it. Some of them planned it. Some of them were pushed into it. And some of them had no idea what was happening until the money was already in someone else's hands. Today we're pulling back the curtain on the 10 youngest celebrities who built, or were handed, jaw-dropping fortunes before most people even figured out what they wanted to do with their lives. But this isn't just a list of big numbers, because behind every one of these names is a story that's messier, darker, and more complicated than their highlight reels let on. Some of these fortunes came with a price tag that had nothing to do with money, and a few of these stories have details that their PR teams would very much prefer you didn't know about. Let's get into it. Hash 10. Billie Eilish. She was 13 years old when she uploaded a song to SoundCloud that she and her brother Phineas had made in his bedroom. No label. No marketing team. No stylist. Just a couple of kids from Los Angeles with a microphone and an idea. Ocean Eyes exploded overnight in a way that nobody, including Billie herself, had anticipated. Within weeks, the music industry came calling. By 14, she had a record deal. By 17, she had released her debut album. By 18, she had 5 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, making her the youngest artist in history to sweep the 4 major Grammy categories in a single night. Let that sink in for a second. 18 years old. Most people at 18 are worried about their first semester of college. Her net worth climbed past $30 million before her 20th birthday, and it's continued to grow from there. World tours, brand partnerships, a fragrance line, film scores. The revenue streams stacked up fast. But here's the thing about Billie Eilish that doesn't always make it into the feel-good headlines. The cost of blowing up that young was something she's spoken about openly, and the picture she paints, anything but glamorous. Billie has talked extensively about battling Tourette syndrome, depression, and a near-debilitating obsession with her own body image. For years, she wore oversized clothes specifically to avoid the internet's commentary on her figure. A commentary that came anyway, relentlessly, the moment she wore anything fitted. She's described feeling like public property, like her identity was being consumed and picked apart by millions of strangers who felt entitled to weigh in on everything from her hair color to her relationships to her weight. There were periods, she said, where she barely left her room. And then there's the industry side of things. Rumors have floated for years about tensions between Billie and various figures in the business. Disputes over creative direction, speculation about who really controls the vision behind the brand. Nothing confirmed, nothing legally substantiated, but fans have noted shifts in her artistic direction over the years, have sparked debates about autonomy and influence in ways that feel pointed. Whether those shifts were her choice, a collaboration, or something else entirely is something only people in those rooms know for certain. What's not in question is this. Billie Eilish built something extraordinary. She just also paid for it in ways that money can't measure. And if that story sounds like a tough start, wait until you hear about a kid who made nearly $30 million before he was old enough to have a bedtime. Hash 9 Ryan Kaji, Ryan's World. In 2015, a 4-year-old boy in Texas started appearing in YouTube videos where he unboxed toys, played games, and generally did what 4-year-olds do. Except cameras were rolling and tens of millions of people were watching. Ryan Kaji, the face of what became Ryan's World, was not just a viral phenomenon. He was, for multiple years running, YouTube's highest paid creator. At his peak, he earned an estimated $29 million in a year. He was 9 years old. 9. The Ryan's World empire expanded in ways that most adults with 20 years of business experience couldn't manage. Merchandise lines at Target and Walmart. A Nickelodeon animated series. Clothing. Food products. Theme park deals. The brand scaled in every direction simultaneously, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in retail sales. By any measure of commercial success, the operation is staggering. But there's a conversation that followed this story, that the feel-good kid makes millions, framing tends to gloss over entirely. Child advocacy organizations, legal experts, and ethicists began raising serious questions about the nature of Ryan's situation. In many states, there are laws governing how much time minors can spend working and what percentage of their earnings must be protected in trust accounts, Laws that were originally passed in the wake of stories about child actors who grew up to find their fortunes had been spent by the adults managing them. The question wasn't whether Ryan was being loved and cared for. By all accounts, he has a close, attentive family. The question was structural. Who actually controls the money? What protections exist for the child at the center of this operation? And what does it mean to build a commercial brand around a child's natural play behavior? Reports emerged suggesting that some consumer watchdog groups had raised concerns about the advertising practices within the channel, specifically whether very young viewers could meaningfully distinguish between content and promotion. The FTC took notice. Investigations followed. The channel's practices were scrutinized in ways that most YouTube channels never experience. Ryan himself, now a teenager, has continued to work. Whether the young man has ever had the space to figure out who he is outside of the brand that bears his name is a question that only he can answer, probably not for several more years. The money is real. The questions around it are equally real. And they point to something uncomfortable about how we collectively celebrate child success stories without always asking who's really running the show. Speaking of people who were very publicly accused of running someone else's show, let's talk about Kylie Jenner. #8, Kylie Jenner in 2019, Forbes magazine put Kylie Jenner on its cover with a headline calling her the world's youngest self-made billionaire at 21 years old. The internet did not take this quietly. The backlash was immediate, intense, and in many ways it hasn't fully stopped since. The arguments against the self-made label are ones you've probably heard. Kylie grew up in one of the most famous and wealthy families in American entertainment. She had a built-in audience of hundreds of millions before she sold a single lip kit. Her mother, Kris Jenner, is widely regarded as one of the sharpest business managers in the celebrity world. The infrastructure, the brand recognition, the capital. None of it came from a girl with nothing and a dream. Critics argued that calling Kylie Jenner self-made was an insult to the actual meaning of the phrase. Kylie pushed back, and honestly, not without a point. She did identify the product. She did build the company. She did make decisions about direction and partnerships. Whether or not you had famous parents, building a cosmetics company to a billion-dollar valuation in a few years is genuinely not something most people with any background could do. But then 2020 arrived, and things got complicated. When Kylie sold a majority stake in Kylie Cosmetics to Coty Inc. for approximately $600 million, the transaction came with financial disclosures. And those disclosures told a story that didn't quite match what had been presented to the public. Revenue figures, sales numbers, the scale of the operation, the actual data was significantly lower than what had previously been reported. Forbes walked back its billionaire designation. The story shifted from youngest billionaire to reported billionaire status appears to have been significantly overstated. The exact word Forbes used was that the Jenners had lied, a word that generated its own round of legal threats and denials. What's left is murkier and arguably more interesting than either the original headline or the takedown. Kylie Jenner, whatever label you attach to her, built a real business, sold it for real money, sits on a fortune that is objectively enormous, regardless of exactly how many zeros it has. The controversy around the number hasn't slowed the brand. If anything, the scrutiny may have made it more famous. What that says about fame, wealth, and the stories we build around both is something worth sitting with. But we're just getting warmed up because the next name on this list made his money in a way that was arguably even more chaotic, and the controversies that followed were in a completely different category. #7. Jake Paul. There is perhaps no figure in the modern entertainment landscape who generates stronger opinions in every direction than Jake Paul. Fans will tell you he's a self-made entrepreneur who outworked everyone and built an empire from scratch. Critics will tell you he's a cautionary tale about what happens when attention and money arrive before character and judgment. The truth, as usual, involves both. Jake Paul rose to prominence on Vine, the short video platform that launched a generation of creators, and transitioned to YouTube as Vine died. By his early 20s, he was pulling in millions from brand deals, merchandise, and the raw volume of views his content generated. He started a collaborative creator house called Team 10 that became both a content factory and a source of near-constant drama. Former Team 10 members have made videos, given interviews, and in some cases filed legal actions alleging everything from toxic working conditions, financial manipulation to worse. Jake has denied the most serious allegations and settled various disputes without admission. The boxing pivot was genuinely unexpected and genuinely successful. Starting as a spectacle and evolving into something approaching a legitimate sporting endeavor, Jake's fights drew pay-per-view numbers that surprised the traditional boxing world. He fought retired athletes, other YouTubers, and eventually credible professional fighters. Win or lose, the events made money, serious money. Estimates put his career earnings from boxing and related ventures in the tens of millions. But the controversies accumulated in ways that deserve their own documentation. There were reports about his conduct in his former neighborhood in California, a situation involving accusations from residents that his filming operations and the crowds they attracted created genuine disturbance and safety concerns. There were the social media incidents, the expired product allegedly sold to fans, the allegations from former collaborators about how they were treated financially. Most notoriously, there are ongoing online discussions, framed consistently as allegations and speculation by the people raising them, about his personal conduct toward women, including some who were considerably younger at the time. Jake has denied wrongdoing. What isn't denied is the money. By his mid-20s, Jake Paul had built a financial portfolio that went well beyond YouTube, touching real estate, sports ventures, and investment plays. Whether the reputation that's built alongside that portfolio is an asset or a liability in the long run is a question his career is still in the process of answering. Some stories on this list are about kids who rose fast and burned out. Others are about kids who had the universe handed to them. The next one is about someone who had everything and then made a deliberate choice to step sideways and find out who he actually was. #6. Jaden Smith. The most important thing to understand about Jaden Smith is that he had every reason to simply coast. Born to Will Smith, one of the most commercially successful actors in Hollywood history, and Jada Pinkett Smith, Jaden grew up inside a world most people only ever see in magazines. He had acting credits before he was 10. He appeared alongside his father in a major blockbuster when he was 12. Hollywood was ready to receive him whenever he wanted to walk through the door. He didn't walk through that door. Not the way they expected, anyway. Jaden pivoted toward music, releasing projects that were genuinely unconventional, abstract, personal, experimental in ways that didn't fit neatly into any commercial category. The critical reception was mixed. Some reviewers took the work seriously. Others dismissed it as a famous kid indulging himself. The public debate around Jaden's artistic identity became its own cultural conversation, partly because of the platform he had and partly because of his habit of making public statements that were deeply polarizing, philosophical, provocative, sometimes baffling. But here's the part of the story that tends to get lost in all the discourse about his tweets. At 17, Jaden co-founded Just Water, a company built around environmental sustainability that sourced spring water and packaged it in paper-based cartons designed to reduce plastic waste. The company secured investment from major sustainable business advocates, distributed through significant retail channels, and became a genuine business operation, not a celebrity vanity project. By any reasonable measure, building a company with real operations and a legitimate environmental mission while still a teenager is remarkable. His net worth, derived from acting, music, and business, has been estimated in the range of $8 million and climbing, though the trajectory of Just Water and other ventures suggests the ceiling is considerably higher. And discussed online, though with far less certainty, involves the broader dynamics of the Smith family itself. The public fallout from various incidents involving Will Smith, including events at the Academy Awards that became global news, cast a shadow over the entire family's public image. Jaden's relationship with his father and the emotional weight of navigating that publicly has been speculated about extensively. Jaden himself has been measured in how much he shares, but he has spoken about the importance of mental health and the difficulty of processing personal things in public. Whether the family dynamics have impacted his career trajectory is something fans and observers have theorized about at length without having clear answers. What is clear is that Jaden Smith is considerably more interesting and considerably more driven than the meme version of him suggests. And the next person on this list proves that the shadow of a famous family can go in very different directions. #5 Willow Smith, where Jaden leaned into the avant-garde. Willow was pushed into the spotlight even younger and had to find her way back out of it. At 9 years old, she released Whip My Hair, a pop song so catchy, so absurdly of its moment, that it immediately made her a household name. She was on tour. She was in magazines. She was performing on major stages before she was 10. And then abruptly she stopped. The story that came out later was striking. Willow, by her own account, reached a point where she simply refused to continue. She told her parents she needed off the hamster wheel. And rather remarkably, given the amounts of money in motion and the career momentum she was turning away from, they let her stop. Will and Jada have spoken about this publicly. The decision to respect their daughter's instincts, even when it meant walking away from what would have been an enormous commercial opportunity. For better or worse, they stepped back. What followed was years of relative quiet education, exploration, development. When Willow re-emerged as an artist, she came back on her own terms, making music that was significantly more personal and unconventional than anything the pop machine would have produced for her. Her sound evolved toward alt-rock, introspective punk, raw emotional territory. It connected with a different kind of fan, one who was specifically drawn to authenticity over polish. Her net worth, built on music, modeling campaigns, and the Smith family's overall brand infrastructure, is estimated in the range of $6 to $8 million. That number will likely look very different in a decade. But the fuller story involves something she discussed publicly that required real courage. Willow has spoken openly about a period in her younger years when she engaged in self-harm, something she has connected directly to the pressures of early fame, the loss of privacy, and the experience of having her identity defined publicly before she had the chance to define it herself. She has framed her recovery as a journey through self-discovery and creative expression, and the openness with which she's talked about it has made her a voice that resonates with a lot of young fans who recognize something of themselves in that story. What she represents, ultimately, is the possibility of surviving an industry that has destroyed plenty of people and emerging from it with your sense of self mostly intact. That's not a small thing. The next names on this list came up in an environment that was even more volatile. The streaming-era rap world, where fortunes are built almost overnight, and the lifestyle that comes with them has a very high mortality rate. #4, the streaming-era rap millionaires. Lil Tecca and Lil Mosey. The architecture of the music industry changed fundamentally in the 2010s, and one of the effects of that change was that young artists, very young artists, could suddenly accumulate streaming numbers and financial returns in timelines that would have been impossible in any previous era. You didn't need radio play. You didn't need a major label to push your single. You needed the right song to hit the right playlist at the right moment, and if it did, the money followed fast. Lil Tecca was 17 when Ransom dropped in 2019 and became one of the biggest streaming records of the year. The track accumulated hundreds of millions of plays across platforms. A record deal followed. An album followed. The financial returns for a teenager were staggering by any standard. Industry sources placed his early earnings in ranges that most adults never see in their careers. He was still technically in high school. Lil Mosey followed a similar arc, a debut that exploded on streaming, rapid label attention, a career trajectory that moved from anonymity to millions in what felt like weeks. His song Blueberry Faygo became a genuine cultural moment in 2020, racking up billion-stream territory. The darker dimension of both these stories is harder to ignore if you follow the music closely. Both artists have had incidents that their teams would prefer to minimize. Lil Mosey faced serious legal accusations, allegations that were extensively covered but that he has denied and that are important to describe as unverified allegations rather than established fact. The case attracted significant attention and raised questions about the environment that surrounds young rap artists, the entourage culture, the access that comes with sudden wealth, the lack of institutional guidance for teenagers navigating a world most adults aren't equipped to handle. The pattern isn't unique to these two. The streaming era has produced dozens of young rap millionaires, and the casualty rate, legally, personally, and in some cases literally, has been devastating. The infrastructure that once protected artists from the worst excesses of sudden fame has largely been dismantled, replaced by algorithmic acceleration that pushes people to the front before they've had time to develop the tools to survive being there. These two are still working, still making music, still building, but the industry around them has claimed enough young people that the success story can never quite be told without acknowledging the environment it exists in. The next person on this list came into fame through a much older platform, but the lessons turned out to be eerily similar. Amwadija Tres, Madison Bear in Minor. 2012. A 12-year-old girl from Long Island posted a cover of Etta James at last on YouTube. Justin Bieber, who was himself still a teenager and not far removed from being discovered through YouTube covers, saw it and tweeted it out to his millions of followers. Overnight, Madison Beer went from unknown to internet famous. The trajectory that followed looked, from the outside, like a fairy tale. The reality was considerably more complicated. Madison Beer spent years in a kind of professional purgatory, signed to Island Records, associated with Bieber's management team, given opportunities that most aspiring artists would consider a dream, but simultaneously described by her own account as deeply unhappy, controlled, and unable to actually release the music she wanted to make. Albums were delayed. Singles came and went. The promised breakthrough kept not quite arriving. She has described feeling trapped in a version of her career that didn't feel like hers. The personal pressures compounded the professional ones. Madison has been extraordinarily public about her struggles with mental health, specifically borderline personality disorder, a diagnosis she shared openly in a way that was relatively unprecedented for someone at her level of visibility. She's described periods of crisis, hospitalizations, and the particular cruelty of experiencing those things, while simultaneously being a public figure whose every appearance was being photographed and discussed. Parasocial relationship her audience had with her. The sense of ownership, the constant commentary on her appearance, her choices, her relationships, added layers of complexity to an already difficult situation. There was also a deeply violating incident involving private content that was distributed without her consent. A situation that affected her profoundly and that she has spoken about in terms of long-term trauma. The way the internet responded to that incident, which involved significant victim blaming, is something she has described as among the most damaging experiences of her life. By her mid-20s, Madison Beer had finally released music that felt genuinely her own. Life support and subsequent projects received critical attention that acknowledged real artistic development. Her net worth, estimated at $16 million and rising, reflects brand deals, music income, and a growing presence in multiple entertainment sectors. But the path from that 12-year-old YouTube cover to where she stands now ran through some genuinely dark territory. The fairy tale framing that got applied to her story at the beginning turned out to miss almost everything important about it. And speaking of fairy tale framings that deserve a harder look, the next name generated more pure internet controversy than almost anyone of her generation. #2. Charli D'Amelio in late 2019, a 15-year-old girl from Connecticut started posting dance videos on TikTok. Within months, she had more followers than almost anyone on the planet. Within a year, she was the most followed creator on the platform, with over 100 million followers. Within 2 years, she was estimated to be worth somewhere in the range of $20 million. She was 17 years old. The speed of Charli D'Amelio's rise was so extreme that it became its own kind of cultural phenomenon. She didn't have a particular skill that required years of development. She wasn't a trained musician or a classical dancer or an actor with a body of work. She was relatable, she moved well, she was likable, and she arrived at precisely the right moment on precisely the right platform. The algorithm amplified her, and the amplification fed itself until she was simply inescapably everywhere. The backlash came quickly and came hard. At its most benign, it was fans expressing disappointment when she crossed follower milestones without the enthusiasm they expected. At its ugliest, it coordinated harassment campaigns that targeted her appearance, her family, her relationships, and her mental health. Charli has talked about reading comments about her own death, about the way anonymous cruelty on the internet operates when it's directed at a teenager. She lost a significant amount of weight over a period that her family and fans documented with concern. She addressed an eating disorder publicly, describing the feedback loop between public scrutiny of her body and her own relationship with food as something genuinely difficult to break out of. Her family's reality show, The D'Amelio Show, documented some of this in real time, which created its own complications. Putting a documented mental health crisis inside an entertainment product is an uncomfortable tension that the show never fully resolved. Whether it was therapeutic self-expression or exploitation of difficulty for ratings is a question that generated significant debate. The Hype House, the collaborative TikTok creator space where Charli spent significant time, became its own soap opera. Internal conflicts, departures, accusations of mistreatment circulating among members. None of it ever fully crystallized into definitive verified fact, but the vibe around the operation deteriorated publicly in ways that affected everyone connected to it. There were also reports involving behavior towards staff members, allegations that circulated online with some persistence about how Charli and or her family interacted with people who worked for them. These were framed as allegations and rumors by those reporting them, never confirmed through any formal process. What isn't in dispute is the financial reality. $20 million, a clothing line, brand partnerships with major companies, a podcast. an ongoing media presence that has evolved past TikTok into broader entertainment territory. Charli D'Amelio turned an algorithm moment into something durable, which is harder than it looks. But the most interesting question about her trajectory is the one nobody can answer yet. What does this look like in 20 years? When TikTok inevitably recedes as a cultural force, when she's 35 and the audience that grew up with her has moved on to whatever platform comes next, what does the asset of having once been the most followed person on the most popular app in the world actually amount to? That story is still being written, and all of that gets put into sharp relief by the person at the top of this list. Someone who built his wealth not through entertainment at all, but through engineering, and who became the youngest self-made billionaire in history, in a way so quiet that most people have never heard his name. #1. Austin Russell. If you asked 100 people to name the youngest self-made billionaire in history, you would hear Zuckerberg. You might hear Kylie Jenner. You would almost certainly not hear Austin Russell. And yet, as of 2020, Austin Russell held that title definitively. The youngest self-made billionaire on record, at 25 years old, and he earned it not through social media followers or viral videos, but through LiDAR technology. Austin Russell dropped out of the University of California to found Luminar Technologies, a company focused on developing the laser sensor systems that autonomous vehicles need to perceive the world around them. It was deeply technical work, the kind of work that requires serious engineering, knowledge, and vision about where a technology sector is heading before the rest of the market has caught up. He reportedly turned down a Thiel Fellowship offer to do it on his own terms. When Luminar went public through a merger with a special purpose acquisition company in 2020, the resulting valuation made Austin Russell a billionaire at 25, and because the company was genuinely his creation, built without a family brand or celebrity audience or pre-existing wealth infrastructure, the self-made label applies here in a way that generates almost no serious dispute. He built a thing. The market valued the thing. He became wealthy as a result. The story is almost boring in its straightforwardness, which is precisely why it's so striking when placed next to every other name on this list. There are no scandals attached to Austin Russell's name, no exploitation allegations, no mental health crises documented for public consumption, no controversy about whether the label of success applies. There is just a person who had an idea about a technology problem, worked on it relentlessly, and created something genuinely valuable. His net worth has fluctuated significantly with Luminar's stock price. That's the nature of a company that's still growing and not yet consistently profitable. There have been periods where his paper worth declined substantially. The autonomous vehicle industry is not having a simple few years. Luminar has faced questions about its path to profitability that have weighed on its stock. Whether Austin Russell emerges from this period as a lasting member of the billionaire class or as someone whose moment was real but time-limited is genuinely uncertain. But that uncertainty is itself meaningful. Building something real means being exposed to the actual risks of the real world. That's different from the kind of celebrity wealth that is essentially a function of public attention, which can be here today and somewhere else tomorrow, for reasons that have nothing to do with any decision you made. At the top of the youngest rich list, separated from the influencers and the musicians and the reality TV royalty, sits an engineer who most people have never heard of. That probably says something. Conclusion: here's what's worth sitting with after running through all 10 of these stories. The money is real. The numbers are genuinely staggering, and the commercial achievements, whatever their origin, are not nothing. Building any kind of financial success is hard, and doing it young is harder. But look at the pattern across these stories and something else emerges. The mental health crises. The allegations of exploitation. Sometimes by industry, sometimes by family, sometimes by management structures that operated in legal gray zones. The question of who is actually in control, and who is benefiting, and whether the person at the center of the story has the tools to protect themselves. These questions appear again and again across radically different backgrounds, different industries, different levels of fame. The entertainment industry in particular has a long and well-documented history of consuming young people and distributing the profits to adults in positions of authority. The streaming and social media era hasn't changed that pattern. In some ways, it's accelerated it, because the access and the money and the attention can arrive so fast that there's no time to build the defenses that might otherwise exist. What separates the people on this list who seem to be navigating it with some success is harder to pin down. Some of it is luck. Some of it is having at least one person in their life who was looking out for them rather than looking out for themselves. Some of it is a kind of resilience that is probably innate. and some of it is the willingness to step back, like Willow Smith did at age 10, and say, "Not like this." The question worth carrying with you after watching this isn't whether we should celebrate these young fortunes. It's whether we've been asking the right questions about them. The highlight reel is easy. The full story is almost always something else. If any of these stories landed differently than you expected, drop a comment below. There are specific names on this list where the full story goes considerably deeper than we could get into here. And if you want to see us go further into any one of these individually, let us know. The rabbit holes are deep and only getting started.